White billionaire family mocked the black woman at gala, then she canceled their 5B deal. The night was beautiful, filled with the sound of clinking glasses, soft music, and laughter echoing from every corner of the grand ballroom. It was the kind of event everyone in the city wanted to be a part of, the Whitmore family's annual gala. The Whitmore name was synonymous with wealth and power, and the event was known for being an exclusive gathering of the country's elite. Invitations were rare, and attendance was considered a privilege. Tonight, the ballroom sparkled with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, the polished floors reflecting the light, and a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. Olivia Green stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the crowd. As she walked in, she felt the weight of every stare. She had been invited to this prestigious event as a guest of honor, a sign of her success in the business world. But as she entered, she couldn't shake the feeling that her presence was different from everyone else's. Olivia, a black woman with a reputation for running a successful company, stood out in this sea of wealthy white faces. She knew the challenges that came with being in a room like this, challenges that many of her counterparts would never face. There was a quiet, invisible wall that she had to push through every time she entered spaces like this. Her dress was a statement, sleek and black, with a subtle shimmer that caught the light as she moved. She wore her natural hair, full and beautiful, framing her face with a quiet strength. Yet despite her outward confidence, she couldn't escape the feeling of being a bit of an outsider. Olivia had worked tirelessly to get where she was, building her career from the ground up. She had fought through countless obstacles, broken barriers, and proved her worth in a world that wasn't always welcoming to people like her. But tonight, it felt as though her hard work and achievements were being overshadowed by something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The Whitmore family had invited Olivia because of her impressive track record, but it wasn't just her success they cared about. The Whitmores were a family that prided themselves on being seen as inclusive, as champions of diversity. They liked to show off their progressive values, offering opportunities to people from underrepresented backgrounds. Olivia knew she had earned her place in the room, but she also knew the Whitmores had invited her to check a box. They wanted to appear open-minded, forward-thinking, but the truth was, they didn't fully understand what it meant to have someone like Olivia at their event. She could feel the glances from the crowd, some curious, some dismissive, others unsure of what to make of her. Whispers followed her as she walked through the ballroom, and though she tried to ignore them, it was impossible not to notice. There were polite smiles, but there was also something else, an air of confusion, as if people were wondering what a woman like her was doing at a gathering like this. Olivia didn't mind being noticed. She knew the power of standing out. But tonight, the attention felt different. It felt like she was being judged, measured by standards that had nothing to do with her accomplishments. As she made her way to the bar, she overheard a conversation between two women dressed in high-end couture, their voices dripping with the kind of casual insincerity that Olivia had grown accustomed to over the years. "She's the one who runs that tech company, right?" one of the women said, her voice laced with curiosity but not entirely with respect. "Yes, that's her. Olivia Green, I think. I heard she came from nothing." "Impressive, I guess," the other woman replied, though her tone was anything but admiring. Olivia didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. People like her were often reduced to their backgrounds, their struggles. It was the easy narrative to sell, a black woman who made it to the top despite all odds. The truth, however, was more complicated. Olivia's success wasn't just a story of overcoming hardship. It was a story of brilliance, hard work, and an unyielding determination to be more than the labels others tried to place on her. She took a deep breath, shaking off the comments. She was here to do more than just attend a gala. Olivia had a mission, to prove that she belonged in every room and to make sure people like the Whitmores realized just how powerful she truly was. She wasn't just there as a symbol of diversity. She was there because she had earned her place. The night continued, and Olivia found herself engaged in conversations with various individuals, most of whom were eager to talk about business, power, and influence. Olivia was no stranger to these topics, and she navigated each discussion with ease, her sharp mind making a strong impression on anyone who had the privilege of speaking with her. Yet, despite her success, she felt an uncomfortable distance from the other guests, as though they were indulging her in polite conversation but not fully accepting her as an equal. As the evening wore on, the Whitmore family made their way through the crowd, greeting guests and posing for photographs. James Whitmore, the heir to the family's fortune, stood out among the guests. His arrogance was palpable, his presence commanding attention without him even having to try. Olivia had heard stories about James before. He was charming, yes, but there was always something about him that rubbed people the wrong way. Tonight, as he made his way over to Olivia, she could tell that he wasn't there out of genuine interest. He had an agenda, and it was the same agenda his family always had, to be seen as progressive, to showcase their openness to diversity without actually understanding what it meant to truly include someone. James flashed a smile, extending his hand in greeting. Ms. Green, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Your work in the tech world has been truly impressive. I must admit, it's rare to see someone like you making such waves. Olivia took his hand, her grip firm. She smiled politely, but there was a glint of recognition in her eyes. She had been in these situations before, and she knew exactly how to handle it. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. I'm glad to hear that my work has made an impact. James chuckled lightly, though there was a hint of condescension in his tone. I'm sure it has. You know, we pride ourselves on being open-minded and giving opportunities to people like you. I'm sure you've faced quite a few challenges along the way. The words stung, but Olivia kept her expression neutral. It wasn't the first time someone had spoken to her, as though her success was an anomaly, a fluke, or simply the result of an opportunity given by someone else. She had long ago learned not to react to these comments, but that didn't mean they didn't hurt. Well, I've always believed that success comes from hard work and dedication, Olivia replied, her voice steady. It's about making your own opportunities, not waiting for someone to offer them. James nodded, though his expression revealed that he wasn't fully listening. He was too focused on his own agenda, his own image, to truly hear her. Olivia knew that this conversation wasn't about respect. It was about using her to make himself and his family look good. As James continued to speak, Olivia couldn't help but notice the way his eyes scanned the room, as if he was evaluating the guests like products on a shelf. There was no warmth in his demeanor, no real interest in connecting with her beyond the image she represented. And at that moment, Olivia made a quiet vow to herself. She would show them. She would prove to them all that her success wasn't just a token story. They would see that she was more than capable, more than worthy of being in this room, and that she wouldn't let anyone's disrespect define her. The night continued, and Olivia found herself grappling with a mix of emotions as she tried to enjoy the rest of the evening. The laughter and chatter around her felt distant, like a muffled sound in the background, while she remained hyper-aware of the whispers and glances that followed her every move. She had worked so hard to be here, to earn her place in this world. Yet the way people treated her tonight, especially the Whitmore family, made it feel like her success had been overlooked, reduced to a mere checkbox in their diversity campaign. James Whitmore's words from earlier still lingered in her mind. People like you, those words, so casually spoken, carried a heavy weight. He had meant to be polite, perhaps even complimentary, but Olivia knew better. It was the kind of language used by people who never truly understood the challenges that came with being someone like her in a space like this. To them, she wasn't just Olivia Green, a successful entrepreneur. She was a symbol, an accomplishment, something to be paraded around for their own image and satisfaction. She took a sip of her drink, trying to push the thoughts aside. There was no use in dwelling on the actions of people who would never fully understand her experiences. Tonight, she had a mission. She was here for a reason. This gala, these people, they didn't define her. She defined herself. Still, the more she looked around, the more she realized that she was an anomaly in this room. Olivia wasn't here to follow the usual script. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a force in her industry, a woman who had risen from humble beginnings to build a thriving business, defying all odds along the way. But the more she thought about it, the more she understood the difference in how she was treated compared to her peers. Her success, her reputation, wasn't enough for them. She could feel it in the way people spoke to her, with that mixture of politeness and curiosity, like she was an exotic creature they had never encountered before. They couldn't fully grasp how someone like her could exist in their world, not as a token of diversity, but as a true equal. And it irritated her because deep down, she knew they would never understand until they were forced to. Olivia was no stranger to these types of events. Over the years, she had learned how to navigate the intricate dance of high society. The fake smiles, the polite nods, the subtle jabs. She had attended countless galas, conferences, and networking events where people like the Whitmores tried to make themselves look good by offering opportunities to those from marginalized groups. But Olivia was different. She didn't need their validation, their offers of diversity sponsorship, or their patronizing behavior. She had built something on her own with her own two hands, and no one could take that away from her. As the evening went on, Olivia did her best to engage with others, knowing that making connections was important. She found herself in a conversation with another guest, a woman named Susan, who was a successful venture capitalist. Susan was older in her mid-50s with a sharp eye for spotting talent and potential. She had heard of Olivia's company before and was curious about her rise to success. "So, Olivia," Susan began, her tone warm but probing, "tell me about your company. How did you get started?" "I hear you built it from the ground up." Olivia smiled politely, her mind shifting into business mode. "Yes, that's right. My company started with just a few ideas and a small team. We focused on creating tech solutions that empower underrepresented communities. We've expanded a lot over the years, but at the core, it's always been about innovation and inclusivity." Susan nodded thoughtfully. "I can see why your story resonates with so many. But tell me, how do you navigate the challenges of being in a predominantly male and white-dominated industry? How do you stand out?" The question wasn't new. Olivia had been asked it countless times before, but tonight it hit differently. She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. She didn't want to be just another tokenized success story. She wanted to make it clear that her success wasn't just about beating the odds. It was about her vision, her drive, and her intelligence. "I don't think it's about navigating challenges so much as it is about creating a space where everyone can thrive. I focus on what I can control, my work, my team, my values. And when you do that, people start to take notice. The industry is changing, and I've made sure my company is ahead of the curve." Susan's eyes lit up. "I like that. You're not just surviving, you're leading the way." Olivia's smile deepened, but she couldn't shake the feeling that even in this conversation, Susan saw her as an exception, not the rule. She was being praised for doing something others didn't expect of her. The idea of leading the way, of being the norm, not the exception, still seemed out of reach. There was a part of her that hoped one day this type of conversation would be obsolete, that no one would have to ask black women how they navigated a system designed to keep them out. But that day was far off. Meanwhile, across the room, Olivia noticed James Whitmore again. He was surrounded by a small group of influential men, laughing and talking about business deals and power moves. Olivia couldn't help but notice how everyone seemed to hang on his every word, how effortlessly he commanded the room. There was no mistaking his privilege. It was in the way he spoke, the way people deferred to him, and the way he carried himself. It wasn't just his wealth that made him powerful. It was his lineage, his family's reputation, the legacy they had built over decades. James didn't have to fight for a seat at the table. He was born into it. For people like Olivia, the fight never ended. She had to earn every inch, every opportunity, every accomplishment. And even when she succeeded, she had to do it on her own terms, without the safety net of privilege that James and his family had. As the night wore on, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rising within her. She wasn't here to simply survive in their world. She was here to change it, to prove that people like her weren't just guests at the table, they were the ones shaping the future of business. She had been underestimated for far too long. It was time to show the Whitmore family and everyone else in this room that she wasn't just a diversity hire, a box to check off. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would make sure they knew it. The gala continued into the late hours of the night, but for Olivia, the evening had already taken a new direction. She no longer cared about fitting in or trying to earn their respect. She had a bigger plan in mind, a plan that would not only change the course of her own future, but send a message to the entire business world. The Whitmores and everyone like them would soon realize that they had underestimated the wrong woman. The following day, the gala's opulence felt distant, like a faint memory fading with the morning light. Olivia woke up to a new sense of clarity. The excitement of the night before had given way to a quiet determination. She wasn't going to let the Whitmore family's casual disrespect slide. Not this time. It had taken years for her to get to this point in her career, and she wasn't going to let anyone undermine her, especially not because of who she was or what they assumed about her. The Whitmores might have believed they were above reproach, but Olivia had something they didn't: power. It wasn't just the $5 billion deal James Whitmore had offered her. It wasn't even his offhanded comments about people like you that had set her off. No, it was deeper than that. It was the attitude that the Whitmore family, and so many others in their world, held toward people like her. The unspoken assumption that she didn't belong, that her success was somehow a fluke, or that it was just the result of some diversity initiative. They didn't see her for what she was: an ambitious, sharp, and driven entrepreneur. Instead, they saw her as a tool to help their image. The more Olivia thought about it, the more the situation burned inside her. She wasn't going to stand by while the Whitmores thought they could continue playing these games. No, she was going to take action, but she wasn't going to do it rashly. She wasn't about to burn any bridges without a plan. Olivia knew that every move she made in the business world had consequences. She had worked too hard, had fought too much to let emotions lead her. Her focus now was clear. She would hit them where it hurt the most: their business dealings. She sat down at her desk in her office, a minimalist space that reflected her sharp, organized mind. A whiteboard on one wall had written in neat, bold letters, "Strategies." She took a deep breath, sitting down at her desk and grabbing a notepad. Olivia wasn't just an entrepreneur, she was a strategist. Her ability to think ahead, to predict the future, and to turn obstacles into opportunities had always been her greatest asset. The $5 billion deal with the Whitmore family was more than just a contract. It was a symbol of the system she had spent her career dismantling. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. Olivia could have signed the deal without a second thought. It would have been a massive win for her company, and it could have opened the door to more deals with other wealthy families. But that's exactly what the Whitmores assumed she wanted: approval, validation, and access to the circles they controlled. What they didn't know was that Olivia didn't need them. She had built her company without their help, and she would continue to grow it without their approval. As she stared at the contract in front of her, her mind raced. She could see James Whitmore's smirk in her mind, hear his voice dripping with condescension. "People like you," he had said. "It's rare to see someone like you making such waves." Olivia clenched her fists. She had been underestimated for too long, but no longer. It was time for her to change the game entirely. She would walk away from this deal, but not just walk away. She would cancel it. She would cancel the deal in a way that would send a message that would be heard loud and clear in the business world. The Whitmores thought they held the power, but Olivia would show them that she was in control of her own destiny. She called her legal team. They were experienced, reliable, and known for being able to handle complex situations with grace and precision. "I need to move forward with canceling the deal with the Whitmore family," Olivia said when they picked up. "We have the grounds, but I want to make sure it's done properly. I want them to understand that this isn't just business. This is about respect. I will not let them treat me as if I'm here to fulfill some diversity quota." Her lawyer, Thomas, was quiet for a moment before responding. "Understood. I'll begin the process and make sure everything is in place to send the message you want. But you're aware that walking away from a deal like this will shake things up, right?" Olivia nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I know, but it's time. We've been playing by their rules for too long. This time I'm making the rules." After the call, Olivia sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. She felt the weight of the decision, but she didn't hesitate. This was the right move. The Whitmores had no idea what they had just started, but Olivia was ready. She had seen how people in power operated, and she understood the dynamics of influence and control. What they didn't realize was that, in their attempt to exert power over her, they had only made her more determined to stand her ground. She wasn't just going to be a player in their game anymore. She was going to redefine the game entirely. The next few hours were filled with phone calls and meetings. Olivia worked with her legal team, making sure all the paperwork was in order. She also reached out to her most trusted allies in the business world, letting them know what was happening. The message she was about to send would not just impact her, it would ripple through the industry. The Whitmores thought they had the power, but Olivia had something they didn't. She had the respect of the people who mattered. Her network was solid, and she had earned the trust of those who recognized her value. She knew there would be consequences. The Whitmore family had far-reaching influence, and they would likely try to retaliate. But Olivia had never been one to back down from a fight. She had faced adversity her entire life. From the moment she had started her business, she had been told it wouldn't work, that she couldn't succeed. She had been dismissed, doubted, and belittled. But every time they had underestimated her, she had proven them wrong, and she would do it again. By the time the sun began to set, the cancellation letter was prepared. Olivia reviewed it one last time. It was clear, direct, and professional, but it carried a weight that went beyond words. She wasn't just canceling a deal, she was making a statement. She was showing the world that respect couldn't be bought or given lightly. The Whitmores had thought they could use her for their own gain, but Olivia would prove that she wasn't someone to be used. She was someone to be reckoned with. She sent the letter. And just like that, the deal was canceled. But Olivia knew that the real work was just beginning. The Whitmore family would undoubtedly make their move next, but Olivia was ready. The world had underestimated her once, but it wouldn't make that mistake again. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about rewriting the rules, setting new standards, and demanding the respect she had always deserved. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Olivia. She had done what many people in her position would have considered unthinkable. She had walked away from the largest deal of her career. But as she sat in her office, staring at the email confirming the cancellation, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It was the right decision, and she had no doubt about it. The Whitmore family hadn't expected this. They had underestimated her. James Whitmore had assumed that she would be grateful for their offer, that she would jump at the chance to work with them. After all, they were a powerful family with connections that stretched across industries. They believed that their wealth and influence would make her pliable, but they had misjudged her. The cancellation had been swift and final. Olivia's legal team had handled everything perfectly. The letter she had sent was firm, but it didn't burn bridges unnecessarily. It was professional, making it clear that she had chosen to walk away from the deal based on principles. She wasn't just rejecting their offer, she was rejecting the way they had treated her. The way they had assumed that she, like so many others, could be bought. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the deal. It was about something bigger, respect. Olivia knew that she didn't need to rely on the Whitmores for success. She had worked hard to build her business from the ground up, and she had done it on her own terms. She wasn't going to let anyone, no matter how powerful, make her feel like she owed them anything. As Olivia prepared for the storm that was about to come, she couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. She had faced challenges before, and she had always come out stronger on the other side. The Whitmore family, as influential as they were not invincible. They were about to learn that the hard way. In the days following the cancellation, Olivia's phone rang constantly. Journalists, business leaders, and even some of her competitors were eager to get her side of the story. It was no surprise that the media had caught wind of the situation. After all, a $5 billion deal falling apart was newsworthy. But Olivia wasn't interested in making a spectacle out of it. She knew that the press would sensationalize the story, and she didn't want to give them the ammunition they needed to twist her words. Instead, she decided to speak directly to the people who mattered, the ones who knew her and understood what she stood for. She arranged a few private meetings with trusted allies in the business world. These were the people who had supported her from the beginning, the ones who believed in her vision and her ability to succeed on her own. Olivia knew that their support would be crucial in the coming days, especially when the Whitmore family inevitably tried to turn the tables and spin the situation in their favor. James Whitmore, predictably, wasn't happy about the cancellation. Olivia knew that he would try to salvage the deal in some way, whether by offering her more money or attempting to repair the damage to his family's reputation. But Olivia had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to be swayed by their wealth or their attempts to manipulate the situation. She had stood up for herself, and now it was time to stand tall. Meanwhile, the business world was buzzing with speculation. Everyone had an opinion on why Olivia had walked away from such a lucrative opportunity. Some thought it was a bold move, a sign of her independence and refusal to be controlled. Others were skeptical, questioning whether she had made a mistake by turning down the deal. But Olivia didn't care about what others thought. She knew that in the long run, this decision would prove to be the right one. The Whitmores might have tried to use her, but in the end, they had only made her stronger. As Olivia reflected on everything that had happened, she realized just how far she had come. She remembered the early days of her business, when she had struggled to get her foot in the door. The countless rejections, the moments when she had doubted herself, those were the times that had shaped her into the woman she was today. And now she was in control. She had proven to herself and to the world that she didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. But even as Olivia reveled in the satisfaction of her decision, she knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Whitmore family wasn't going to let this go without a fight. They had power, influence, and resources at their disposal. They could try to ruin her reputation, spread rumors, or launch a smear campaign. But Olivia wasn't afraid. She had been through worse. She had faced challenges before, and each time she had come out stronger. She was ready for whatever they threw her way. She spent the next few days preparing for the backlash. Her team worked tirelessly, gathering support from other businesses and industry leaders who respected her. Olivia knew that the more people who stood with her, the harder it would be for the Whitmores to take her down. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been underestimated, everyone who had ever been dismissed because of their background or appearance. This wasn't just about business. It was about proving that respect couldn't be bought or manipulated. It had to be earned. Olivia's phone continued to ring with calls from reporters. Some of them were curious about her next steps. Others wanted to know if she regretted walking away from such a massive deal. Olivia was prepared for the questions, but she wasn't interested in explaining herself. She wasn't going to give the media the chance to twist her words or portray her as anything less than the strong, independent businesswoman that she was. She had nothing to prove to anyone. The Whitmores may have underestimated her, but now they were going to see just how wrong they had been. Over the next week, Olivia's decision began to gain traction. The business world was watching closely, and the more people saw her stand her ground, the more respect she gained. Her competitors, once silent and perhaps even doubtful of her success, began to take notice. Olivia's refusal to be controlled by the Whitmore family had earned her admiration, and soon, her inbox was flooded with messages of support from people who had watched her rise and respected her integrity. Olivia knew that the Whitmore family would eventually make a move, but she was prepared. She had already taken the first step in reshaping the narrative. The Whitmores had thought they could use her as a pawn in their game, but they had underestimated her resolve. Olivia wasn't just playing for a $5 billion deal. She was playing for something much more important: her independence, her dignity, and her future. In the end, Olivia knew that the battle wasn't just about this deal. It was about something much bigger. It was about setting an example for other women, for other people who had been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. She was showing them that they didn't have to play by anyone else's rules. They could create their own, just as she had. And as she looked out over the horizon, she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The days that followed Olivia's bold decision felt like a steady march toward change. What had started as a quiet act of defiance had turned into something much bigger, something that was beginning to ripple through the business world. The cancellation of the $5 billion deal with the Whitmore family had made headlines, but it wasn't the sensationalism of the story that interested Olivia. It was the impact it had on those who were watching, those who could see the true strength behind her actions. She had known that her decision would not go unnoticed. In fact, she had expected the Whitmores to react. Powerful families like theirs didn't take kindly to public rejection, especially not from someone they considered an outsider. But what Olivia hadn't expected was how much her stance resonated with others, particularly with those who had long been ignored or sidelined by the corporate world. Messages of support flooded in from all corners: other entrepreneurs, professionals, and even people she hadn't heard from in years. Olivia's phone buzzed constantly with texts and emails from people who admired her courage. But it wasn't just the support from strangers that felt meaningful. It was the way her close colleagues and business allies responded. They had been with her through every challenge, every victory, and now they were standing by her side more firmly than ever. Her decision to stand up against the Whitmore family wasn't just a statement of personal integrity. It was a message to everyone who had been told they didn't belong. And that message was being heard. As the days turned into a week, Olivia found herself growing more confident. She had spent so much time in the past making sure she was never perceived as a token in the business world. She had worked tirelessly to prove that she was more than just a symbol. But now, with the Whitmores pushing back, Olivia realized something important. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She had already earned her place at the table. The media had been quick to pick up the story, and some outlets, predictably, had tried to twist the narrative to fit their own agendas. They painted Olivia's actions as reckless, a mistake made out of emotion. They questioned whether she had made a strategic error in rejecting the deal. But Olivia knew better than to let the media control her story. She had always been in control of her own narrative, and she wasn't about to let a few headlines change that. She had nothing to explain to anyone. While the Whitmore family scrambled to salvage their reputation, Olivia quietly went about her business. She had already begun planning for the next phase. She knew that the Whitmores would not let this go quietly. They were powerful, influential, and had the means to strike back. Olivia had faced powerful opponents before, but this time she was ready. She was no longer just a businesswoman fighting for her place. She was a symbol of resistance, a voice for those who had been overlooked for far too long. In the weeks that followed, Olivia noticed a shift in the way people looked at her. Her competitors, once cold and distant, were now reaching out with offers of partnership. Some of the same companies that had once snubbed her were now eager to collaborate, to benefit from the reputation she had built. It was a reminder that success didn't come from the approval of the powerful. It came from the respect of those who truly understood your worth. And now, more than ever, people were beginning to understand Olivia's worth. As for the Whitmore family, their attempts to retaliate were predictable. James Whitmore, never one to back down from a challenge, had tried to turn public opinion in his favor. He had launched a campaign to paint Olivia as an ungrateful upstart, someone who had let her pride get in the way of business. But Olivia wasn't worried. The more they attacked, the more they exposed their true character. The public could see through their manipulation. People didn't want to see a wealthy family bully a successful businesswoman into submission. They wanted to see her succeed. Olivia didn't waste time focusing on their tactics. Instead, she turned her attention to something far more important, her future. She knew that the cancellation of the deal had been a pivotal moment, but it wasn't the end of her journey. In fact, it was just the beginning. Olivia was already working on new projects, new initiatives, and new partnerships that would further cement her place in the business world. She wasn't just going to bounce back from this. She was going to build something even bigger. Her next move was one she had been preparing for a long time. She knew that now was the time to take her company global. The Whitmore family's attempts to tear her down had only fueled her desire to prove that she could achieve more than they ever imagined. She began reaching out to international partners, expanding her network, and positioning herself as a global leader in her field. Olivia wasn't going to let anyone define her. She was going to define herself, and she was going to do it on her own terms. As she worked toward her next goal, Olivia found herself reflecting on the path that had brought her here. She had come from nothing, built her business from scratch, and fought her way to the top. She had faced countless obstacles, but each one had made her stronger, more determined, and more resilient. And now, she had become something that she hadn't anticipated, a symbol of hope for others who had been told they didn't belong. The more Olivia thought about it, the more she realized how important it was for her to continue pushing forward. Her journey wasn't just about her success. It was about showing the world that anyone, no matter their background, could achieve greatness. She wanted to be an example for young women, for people of color, for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't succeed. She wanted to show them that no matter how hard the world tried to push them down, they could rise above it. As the months passed, Olivia's reputation continued to grow. The business world had taken notice of her courage, her independence, and her ability to make things happen. More opportunities came her way, but she wasn't interested in just taking whatever came her way. Olivia was selective, focusing on the partnerships and projects that aligned with her values. She wasn't just looking for success, she was looking for impact, and impact was exactly what she was going to make. The Whitmore family, for all their wealth and power, had underestimated her. They had thought they could control her, but in the end, it was Olivia who had taken control of her own destiny. She had shown the world that respect wasn't something that could be bought, it had to be earned. And by standing up for herself, she had earned the respect of everyone who mattered. In the end, Olivia's decision to cancel the deal with the Whitmore family didn't just change the course of her own career. It changed the course of the entire industry. She had set a new standard for what it meant to be respected, to be heard, and to be valued. And as she looked ahead to the future, Olivia knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. The world was watching, and she was ready to lead. Months had passed since Olivia made the decision to cancel the $5 billion deal with the Whitmore family. The business world had watched, and though the media had made their usual attempts to sensationalize the story, Olivia had only grown stronger. She had expected backlash, but what she hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect of her decision. The respect and admiration she'd gained from her actions weren't just from her peers. They came from people she hadn't even considered. From young entrepreneurs just starting out to seasoned leaders who had seen their fair share of boardroom drama, everyone was watching her and rooting for her. It was clear now. Olivia's decision had set a new precedent in the business world. She hadn't just walked away from a deal, she had drawn a line in the sand. She had shown that principles and respect mattered more than money and influence. And as the weeks rolled by, more people, more companies, and more leaders came forward to offer their support, understanding that what she had done wasn't just a rejection of a deal. It was a rejection of the culture that allowed people to be treated as less than they were because of who they were or what they looked like. In the months following the cancellation, Olivia's company had grown exponentially. Investors, who once looked past her in favor of bigger, more traditional names, now sought her out. They saw her as someone with integrity, someone who could not only lead a company, but also lead the change the business world needed. It wasn't just about her vision for the future. It was about her ability to stand firm in her values when it would have been so easy to bend under the weight of pressure and money. The Whitmore family, meanwhile, had tried to keep their faces in public, smiling for the cameras, posing for the socialite magazines, but their reputation had been tarnished. People saw their attempts at retaliation as nothing more than the actions of a powerful family trying to regain control after an unexpected loss. Olivia had made it clear that she wasn't going to be a pawn in their game. And now, the business world knew who was really in control. Despite the fallout, Olivia didn't allow herself to dwell on the Whitmore family's desperation. She didn't need to. Her focus remained on the future. She had been building something far bigger than a business empire. She had been building a movement. A movement that emphasized that true leadership wasn't about wealth or family name. It was about authenticity, vision, and the courage to stand by one's principles. Her next move came with even more clarity and confidence. Olivia had spent the last several months quietly planning her next big project, one that would showcase the kind of leadership she had always envisioned. A leadership that brought together the best of technology and business with an unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion. She wanted to create an initiative that would support other underrepresented entrepreneurs, people who didn't have the same opportunities, the same resources, or the same networks that had been afforded to others. It wasn't just about making money. Olivia wanted to make a lasting impact, something that would outlive her and carry the message of change to those who came after her. She knew the road would be difficult. Funding for such initiatives was hard to come by, and the competition for attention in the business world was fierce. But Olivia had never been afraid of challenges. In fact, they fueled her. She saw each obstacle not as a setback, but as an opportunity to innovate, to build something better. In the months leading up to the launch of her new project, Olivia made sure her voice was heard. She participated in conferences, gave interviews, and used her platform to spread the message of empowerment for the marginalized and overlooked. Each speech, each conversation, was an opportunity to speak truth to power. She wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, and her honesty resonated deeply with the audience. What she said wasn't always easy to hear, but it was always honest. Despite the challenges of building a business that centered around change and inclusivity, Olivia found that her efforts were paying off. She had built a community of supporters, entrepreneurs, investors, and allies who were just as passionate about reshaping the business world as she was. And while the road ahead was still filled with uncertainties, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose every time she thought about the future she was creating. This was bigger than a single deal. It was about reshaping how business could and should be done. In one of her interviews, Olivia was asked about her thoughts on the Whitmore family now. She smiled calmly, her eyes reflecting the confidence she had gained over the past months. "The Whitmores are a part of the past, a symbol of what needs to change," she said. "What I've learned is that success is not defined by the wealth you accumulate or the family you're born into. It's about the impact you make, the lives you change, and the legacy you leave behind. That's what truly matters." Her words were widely quoted, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. It was clear that Olivia had become more than just a business leader. She had become an icon for change. People from all over the world looked to her not just for inspiration, but for guidance. And Olivia was ready to lead them into a future where respect, inclusivity, and integrity weren't just ideals. They were the foundations of success. By the time her new initiative was officially launched, Olivia had already solidified her reputation as a trailblazer. The initiative, a business accelerator designed to support entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities, was an instant success. It quickly gained recognition from major organizations, investors, and mentors who wanted to help make the vision a reality. Olivia's personal brand grew stronger, and her company became a leader not just in business, but in social impact. As the project expanded, Olivia found herself traveling more, meeting with other global leaders and innovators who shared her vision. Her reach had expanded far beyond her company, and she had become a beacon of possibility for people who had once been told they couldn't make it. She was living proof that you didn't have to follow the traditional path to success. You just had to believe in your vision and be willing to fight for it. One evening, after returning from yet another successful meeting with potential partners, Olivia sat down in her office and looked around. Her walls were adorned with photos of her journey, her early days starting her company, her team celebrating milestones, and now, the faces of the entrepreneurs she was helping. As she reflected on all she had accomplished, Olivia couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. She had fought for this, for her place at the table, and for the chance to change the world for the better. She had built something meaningful, something that wasn't just about success in the traditional sense. She had built a legacy that would last. Looking ahead, Olivia knew that her work was far from done. There would always be new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But she was ready. She had faced the Whitmore family, the media, and even her own doubts, and each time she had come out stronger. Now she was ready to take on whatever came next, knowing that she had the power to shape the future in ways that would inspire others for generations to come.